These three pyramids are aligned with the Orion Belt. Not only is the axis inside the Great Pyramid aligned with celestial bodies, the pyramids of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure are perfectly aligned with the stars that make up the belt of Orion. Yes, these three stars, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, are well recognized. Why? No one knows. Coincidentally, the southeast corner of the pyramid is aligned. How did the ancient Egyptians not only align these huge structures with each other, but also with the sky? The concept of the Orion Belt was invented 2,000 years after the pyramids were built. More accurate than the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. Could the ancient Egyptians be more accurate than our current civilization? The pyramids were found to point north, but not just in the general direction of the north. It points to the true magnetic north. This is more accurate than the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. The Royal Observatory in Greenwich set the actual clock to GTC, Greenwich Mean Time or Greenwich Meridian Time, 13 degrees away from true north. It was created in 1675. If they couldn't get the true north a few hundred years ago, what were the ancient Egyptians doing? How accurate is the clock of ancient Egypt compared to ours? Long ago, the pyramids weren't standing all alone in the desert like they do today. Imagine, around these big triangle buildings, there were lots of little tombs called graveyards and even special places where people would honor the kings. These kings' helpers lived in smaller houses right nearby. And don't forget about the huge statue with a lion's body and a man's face in Giza. Speaking of that big statue, the Sphinx is a huge puzzle, even more mysterious than the pyramids. No one really knows who made it. Some people guess it was built by a pharaoh named Khafra, who also made the second biggest pyramid around 2500 BC. Others think it might even be older, made by Khafra's dad or even before them, because it looks like water has worn away its face over time. For almost 4,000 years, the Great Pyramid of Giza was the tallest thing made by people anywhere in the world. Then, a big church in England finally got taller in 1311. But the tallest part of that church fell down and they never built it back up again. Once upon a time, in the 12th century, a ruler thought it would be a good idea to try and break the pyramids. He tried really hard but eventually gave up because it was just too tough. Today, you can still see a big cut on one side of Menkaure's pyramid from his attempts. Inside the pyramids, it's pretty cool, like a sunny, 68-degree day, all the time. It's like they had ancient air conditioning with secret tunnels that let cool air in. This kept the rooms nice and cool for the pharaohs to rest in peace. But here's another mystery. Scientists today still can't figure out the secret recipe for the super strong glue that holds the pyramid stones together. Whatever it is, it's kept the pyramids standing strong for thousands of years. The construction process of the Egyptian pyramids was as follows. The pyramids were the tombs of the ancient Egyptian kings, historically known as pharaohs. The ancient Egyptians' devout belief in the gods led them to develop a deeply rooted concept of the afterlife very early on. They even believed that life was but a brief dwelling, and the true enjoyment began after death. As such, the Egyptians viewed the afterlife as a continuation of earthly existence. Influenced by this belief in the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians, while alive, sincerely and confidently prepared for their death. Every wealthy Egyptian was busy preparing their own tomb, decorating it with various items in the hope of achieving eternal life. For a pharaoh or noble, he would spend years, even decades, building a tomb, and command craftsmen to continue engaging in activities such as boating, hunting, feasting, as well as the tasks servants should perform, all depicted in tomb murals and wooden models, to ensure a comfortable life after death, similar to that before death. Legend has it that before the 3rd dynasty of ancient Egypt, regardless of whether one was a noble or a commoner, after death, they were buried in a rectangular tomb built of mud bricks, which the ancient Egyptians called mastaba, a term that had a high connotation in ancient Egypt. Later, a clever young man named Imhotep, while designing a tomb for the pharaoh Dosa, invented a new architectural method. He replaced mud bricks with square stone blocks quarried from the mountains and continuously modified the design of the tomb, eventually building a 6-tiered step pyramid, the prototype of what we see as the pyramid today. In ancient Egyptian texts, the pyramid is terraced, hence it is also called a step pyramid. It is a tall conical structure with a square base and triangular sides, resembling the Chinese character for gold, which is why we call it a pyramid. The step tomb designed by Imhotep was the first stone tomb in Egyptian history. The step pyramid of Djoser, located at Saqqara, is a typical representative of this kind of pyramid. Built around 2750 BCE, it was the first colossal stone building in Egyptian history. Following Pharaoh Djoser, other Egyptian pharaohs emulated him, lavishly building their own tombs while they were still alive, thus initiating a trend of pyramid construction in ancient Egypt. Since the origin of the pyramids dates back to the Old Kingdom period, and the largest pyramids were also built during this period, this era in Egypt is also known as the Pyramid Age. Why did the ancient Egyptian pharaohs want their tombs to be conical, in the shape of the Chinese character for gold? Originally, the pharaohs intended to use the mastaba as their eternal dwelling after death. Later on, around the 2nd to 3rd dynasty, the concept emerged that the king would become a god after death, and his soul would ascend to heaven. This notion is reflected in the pyramid texts discovered later, which include the phrase, "Construct for him, Pharaoh, the stairs to heaven, so that he may ascend to the heavens." The pyramid was such a stairway to heaven. At the same time, the conical shape of the pyramid also symbolized the worship of the sun god, as the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra was represented by the rays of the sun. The pyramid symbolized the sun's rays piercing the sky. Indeed, when you stand on the road to Giza and look west at the angle of the pyramid's edges, you can see the pyramid casting rays of sunlight onto the earth. In the inscriptions of the pyramids, there is a saying, "The sky stretches its radiance towards you so that you may ascend to the heavens, just like the eyes of Ra." Later, the ancient Egyptians' reverence for obelisks also held this significance, as the obelisks also symbolized the rays of the sun. After the 4th dynasty, other pharaohs built many pyramids, but none matched the scale and quality of the aforementioned ones. After the 6th dynasty, as the Old Kingdom fragmented and the power of the pharaohs declined, coupled with the Egyptian people's rebellion and some instances of tomb robbing, pharaohs' mummies were often dragged out of the pyramids. Thus, the pharaohs stopped building pyramids and started carving secret tombs in the deep mountains instead. Construction process. In ancient Egypt around 2480 BC, during the early reign of Pharaoh Khufu, like every pharaoh, he began preparing for his tomb a century in advance. Thus, every summer, royal members would traverse the Nile basin, selecting robust men from each village to work on the construction of the Great Pyramid, serving the king. They were divided into groups of 100,000 to work for 3 months at a time. Among these workers were slaves, but also many ordinary farmers and artisans. Ancient Egyptian slaves used animal power and logs to transport the megaliths to the construction site, then piled the natural sand around the site into a ramp to pull the megaliths up the pyramid. In this manner, layer by layer, the pyramid grew in height. The construction of the Great Pyramid of Khufu took about 30 years. The Nile would flood annually, submerging the land and enriching the soil, making the farmland fertile and thus advancing agriculture. Egypt became one of the earliest countries in history not to invest all its labor in agricultural production. The surplus labor could be used for other purposes, such as building pyramids. Ships laden with labor would meander up the Nile, passing cliffs and fields along the way, with Giza, 10 kilometers southwest of present-day Cairo, as their destination. Egyptian mythology records that in the beginning, everything was a chaotic liquid, and the first dry land to emerge was pyramid-shaped, symbolizing life. Yet, driven by some impulse, the ancient Egyptians chose this symbol of life to construct the resting places for the deceased. The newly ascended Pharaoh Khufu, too, came to the desert under the same compulsion to witness the first and most important ceremony of his reign. For such a colossal structure, stability was key. The architects planned to use massive marble blocks, arranging them in a decreasing fashion layer by layer upwards. This was the most stable structure. After the construction site was chosen, it would be cleared and leveled, followed by skilled stonemasons crafting the foundation, with a large expanse of squared marble flooring forming the core of the pyramid. It is roughly estimated that building the Great Pyramid required 5 million tons of stone. Although the demand was vast, most could be supplied from near Giza. The quarry was located to the south of the construction site, with about 1,500 quarry workers there. As copper was the hardest metal available to the ancient Egyptians, each quarry worker was equipped with a copper chisel. They would chisel small holes into the megaliths, insert wooden wedges, and pour water over them. The expansion force of the wedges soaking in water would split the stone. However, the copper chisels would blunt after dozens of strikes, so another group would soften the dull chisels with fire, sharpen them, and then cool them in water for the stonemasons to use again.